Blog Talk Radio.
Say when the morning comes, you go out. So I want to tell you what the old people told me. They say when the morning comes, you go downtown. So you might see a hole in the ground. I just say I want you to dance all around it, y'all. It was early one morning. It was mighty come morning. I went way downtown. And I seen no hole in the ground, Lord. And I said I danced and I danced, yeah. I said I danced and I danced, Lord.
Good morning. This is the week that was on the 7th day of December 2016. That was live from the Blue Nile in New Orleans, Louisiana. Big Chief Monk Boudreaux as they move towards their Mardi Gras festivities next month. It will be that time of the year. Nonetheless, we are here and you are there, and we move along from WBRN Radio in Boston and on the Boston Red Network. Some interesting things. Carl Robe, we feature him usually on the week that was, and of course he will no doubt be here, at least from the pages of the Wall Street Journal, where he's eating a crow. He talks about the preparation of a crow. We'll get into a bit the affair with Vladimir Putin and the election, a story there about the hacking. And on Friday, the report came out, and we actually posted it up on Facebook, the actual report. Now, this is the not classified version for the civilian audience, we assume. And Trump had his long-awaited briefing. We're not certain exactly what came of that, but nonetheless, our thoughts on this, it's a story that has occupied what we used to call the front pages, or the lead stories in the political news. How much the public is paying attention to it, we really don't know. But generally speaking, in foreign affairs, not much attention at all. But we've heard about this. President Obama alluded to it when he was in one of his interviews. He said basically nothing happens in the Russian Republic unless V.I. Putin knows about it. And basically that's what this confirmed, that V.I. Putin knew about it, that the Russian government favored DJ Trump over the monster. The monster had been a fixture round when she was down at Foggy Bottom, and she tried to do in V.I. Putin. Now, as to which nations favored whom in this presidential race, it was thought that perhaps China would have favored the monster, but evidently they didn't act, and if they did act, no one has said it. But it revolves around Trump. In fact, I decided to retweet old Trump's idea that the Democratic National Committee was not as up on security. Now, we're talking about two or three different things going on here all at once. John Podesta evidently had an email account over at Gmail. Now, Gmail is obviously not under the security supervision of the Democratic National Committee. Now, as to what the DMC had in terms of security, we don't know. And this is the wrong place to be if you're making commentary on a security matter, because you have to know at least what kind of servers they had there. Obviously, some organization was in charge of the security there. What was the security? Were certificates up to date, etc.? Did they use two-factor security or one factor? We don't know. Gmail is being a little bit different. They said that Podesta used a password with an ampersand substituted for the A, PASS, WRD, or you can write that PASS WD. That is a default password for most routers, even routers today. You will get that as a default password many times. Many networks, now we're talking about networks themselves, not email accounts. Password, I've seen many of those where the routers came with password as password, or it said admin for some of the routers, and that's ADMIN, usually just lowercase. In the Unix world, things are case sensitive. In the what used to be the Windows world, it's not. In the Android world, it is not. And in the Mac world, although Mac is on a Unix type platform, I believe, and you can use that. So, in other words, what we went to in the security game is what's called two-factor security. In other words, you'll have a password and some sort of numerical key, like 1, 2, 3. And this is what many will use, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, as just a demonstration key. But when you get into probabilities, if you're using 2, 4, 1, 2, or 3, 3, 1, 5, the chances of someone cracking that tend to be less and less as you go along. Even if you're using 4 characters is usually what you're using, and plus some sort of password that involves uppercase, lowercase, basic signs, and numbers, and that depends. Most modern passwords are written a little bit differently. They don't necessarily start off at least with uppercase. They can use signs like ampersand, exclamation points. My keyboard's a programmer's keyboard, but anyway, some of the things that could be thrown in there. Crackers use a Crackers dictionary, so if you're using words in the English language, you're probably going to get cracked. Now, if you're using words in different languages, the less the probability. But you're not just relying on a password on the system. It is a totally different situation if you have PIN. That's why you'll find on Facebook they ask you for your telephone number. You'll see that to keep out the bots, you enter in some little annoying code there that is a word or a word and a number. That's just to slow you down a bit. Anyway, enough for that of how they got in. We at this mic basically want to spend our time talking about the content and what happened with the content. In other words, what did Podesta say is the big problem there. Where this will go, well, we had a little pro forma committee hearing, but it was lightweight. They really didn't have the report. Now the report is out there, at least civilian portion of it. Trump got his classified version. I assume they gave him that. And the Congress has got theirs, and in Washington it's the kind of town that the leakers will, as they say, start doing what they do best, leak. Nonetheless, we were over at the 538, that's Nate Silver's shop, now under the umbrella of ESPN. And this is from the Survey Monkeys. They did a very large survey. Thought we'd bring you up to date. And this is registered voters who stayed home, probably, and they used the word cost Clinton, otherwise known as the monster of the election. Well, possibly so. Low turnout elections always favor Republicans. Registered voters who didn't register, and this is by Mr. Eaton, on election day were more Democratic-leaning than registered voters who turned out. No doubt about that. According to a poll, post-election, after-election poll, by the Survey Monkeys. The Survey Monkeys work some with the with the Washington Post also. They shared it with the 538, obviously, for a fee, In fact, D.J. Trump would have probably lost to Clinton had Republican and Democratic-leaning registered voters cast at equal rates. Well, that will never happen. The term here, Democrat, Republican leaning, we used to talk about independents. There are independents that lean Republican, usually most of them, and some that lean Democrat, less of them. Nonetheless, election year polls understandably focus on likely voters. Yes, you'll see that as the polls narrow, you go to likely voters. Then after the election, the attention turns to actual voters, mainly exit polls. We talked a little bit about that. Someone online talked about the results from an exit poll, actually, that the country had turned more conservative. Not true at all. We'll use the word true. It's not factual. Let's just use that. Anyway, basically, no, but you had a low turnout pool to work from, and this is where we finally got to this. We're answering some of these questions, but getting good data on Americans who didn't vote is more difficult. That's why SurveyMonkey's poll, which interviewed 100,000 registered voters just after Election Day, including more than 3,600 registered voters who did not vote, is so useful. It's still just one poll, and so the findings aren't, and he's using the word gospel, a very unusual term to use, but nonetheless, let's look at the most newsworthy findings. His opinion, I couldn't get the poll. I went looking for it. We'll go looking someplace else. Registered voters who identified as Democrats and Independents were more likely than Republicans to stay home. Given how closely party ID tracks with voters' choice, the disparity in turnout probably cost Clinton the election. SurveyMonkey did not ask non-voters whom they had voted for, but we know that more than 90% of self-identified Democrats who cast a ballot for Clinton, and more than 90% of Republicans casted for D.J. Trump. More were voters who didn't identify with either or less towards either party were slightly more likely to prefer the monster to Trump. That means that non-voters casted a ballot in accordance with their party identification. Clinton's advantage over Trump nationally would have expanded by 2 or 3 percentage points. In other words, she would have won the election. That would have been enough to flip enough states for her to win the Electoral College. The large gap in party identification between registered voters who cast a ballot and those who didn't also helped to explain why pre-existing polls underestimated Trump. Pre-existing polls suggest that the gap between these two groups would be smaller than in 2012. It actually was larger. They had it wrong. The biggest reason given by non-voters for staying home was they didn't like either candidate. Well, a little bit more than that, but both in the low 40s, and of course D.J. Trump remains there. That's the unfavorable rating. That a pretty sizable difference. So why was Clinton hurt more by non-voters? Trump was able to win in large part because voters who disliked both candidates favored him in big numbers. That's according to exit polls. Clinton apparently couldn't get those voters who disliked both. She was never the queen of turnout. There's no doubt about that, and we'll look back at that. Voters are whiter than non-voters, and looking at the voter pool here, when you look at African Americans, look at Latinos, etc., share of registered voters, 75% of them were European. Those that did not vote, roughly over 50% were European, and so forth. Voters who cast a ballot in general election, 25% were African American or Hispanic, a Latino. Let's just clean this up a little bit. Or a member of another group, but those voters were 42% of those who didn't vote. Drilling down there, African Americans make up 11% of the voters who cast ballots, 19% who didn't. You can see that right away. Disparity really hurt Clinton because African American voters, followers of O.J. Simpson, we call them, by 82 percentage points there, and Latino voters by 40 points, overwhelmingly favored her, while European voters went for D.J. Trump by a 16 point margin. That's in the SurveyMonkey poll. The turnout rates of African Americans was substantially high in 2012. That was when Barack Obama was running. That's according to the Census Bureau current population survey. You'll hear about this quite a bit.